The amber whiskey caught the lamplight like liquid gold as Jake, iron hand, Morrison pushed through the batwing doors of the Dusty Rose Saloon. His spurs sang a metallic song against the weathered floorboards, each step announcing the arrival of a man who'd tasted more desert storms than most had seen sunrises. The saloon fell into that peculiar hush that follows dangerous men. Conversations didn't stop, but they lowered to whispers, like prairie grass bending before an approaching twister. At the far corner table, she sat like a wild rose among tumbleweeds. Ayanna, they called her, Eternal Blossom in her Apache tongue. Her obsidian hair cascaded over shoulders draped in doeskin that seemed to glow against her copper skin. But it was her eyes that stopped Jake's breath, dark as midnight pools, holding secrets deeper than canyon shadows. She was nursing a glass of milk, her slender fingers wrapped around it like she was protecting something precious. The other patrons gave her a wide berth, their gazes hungry but cautious. A lone Apache woman in a frontier saloon was like lightning in a bottle, beautiful, dangerous, and likely to explode. Jake's leather chaps creaked as he approached the bar, his presence drawing her attention like iron filings to a magnet. Their eyes met across the smoky room, and something electric passed between them, a current that made the very air shimmer with possibility. "Whiskey," Jake growled to the bartender, his voice rough as sandpaper on oak. "The kind that burns going down." Ayanna's pulse quickened at the sound. She'd heard stories of Iron Hand Morrison, how he could break a Mustang with just his voice, how his hands could gentle the wildest mare or draw faster than summer lightning. Looking at him now, with his broad shoulders straining against his worn shirt and his jaw set like granite, she believed every tale. The cowboy's reflection caught in the mirror behind the bar, and she studied him through lowered lashes. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, damp with honest sweat. A scar ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, a souvenir from some long-ago battle that only added to his dangerous allure. When he turned, whiskey glass in hand, their gazes locked again. This time neither looked away. "You're far from your people's land," Jake said, his voice carrying across the room despite its low timbre. Ayanna's chin lifted with proud defiance. "The wind carries seeds where it will, cowboy. Some take root in unexpected soil." A slow smile tugged at Jake's lips, the first genuine expression anyone in the saloon had seen from him. "Reckon that's true, little wildflower. Question is, what kind of soil you're looking to grow in?" The tension in the room thickened like honey. Every man present could feel the electricity crackling between the unlikely pair, and more than a few shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Ayanna rose gracefully, her movements fluid as water over stones. "Perhaps that depends on who's doing the planting." The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Jake, whose eyes darkened with something primal and hungry. He drained his whiskey in one burning gulp and set the glass down with deliberate precision. "Careful, Apache princess," he murmured, stepping closer. "Some gardens require rougher hands than others." The saloon held its collective breath as the space between them seemed to shrink, charged with an energy that promised either salvation or damnation, possibly both. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring until it snapped with the crash of the saloon doors. 3 men stumbled in, their clothes dusty from hard riding and their eyes glazed with a particular meanness that comes from too much sun and too little conscience. "Well, well," drawled the leader, a scarred man with tobacco-stained teeth. "Looks like we got ourselves some entertainment tonight, boys." Jake's hand instinctively moved toward his Colt, but Ayanna's sharp intake of breath stopped him cold. Her face had gone pale beneath her copper skin, and her hands trembled like aspen leaves in a storm. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sudden silence. "Don't touch me in front of them. I'm pure, untouched by any man's hands." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. This proud, fierce woman, reduced to pleading because of the leering predators who just entered her sanctuary. Something dark and protective roared to life in his chest, a feeling more powerful than anything he'd ever experienced. The scarred man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Pure," she says. "Boys, looks like we found ourselves a real prize. Been tracking this little Apache dove for 3 days now." Jake stepped forward, his movement fluid and deadly. "The lady's under my protection." Your protection? The man spat into the sawdust. Since when does Iron Hand Morrison play nursemaid to savages? The word hung in the air like a curse. Jake's eyes went cold as winter steel, and every man in the saloon recognized the look of a predator about to strike. Since right now, Jake said, his voice soft as silk and twice as dangerous. And the next man who uses that word is going to be eating his teeth. Ayanna watched in fascination as Jake transformed before her eyes. Gone was the rough cowboy with the easy smile. In his place stood something primal and lethal, a guardian wolf protecting his mate. The scarred man's hand dropped to his gun, but Jake was already moving. His draw was poetry in motion, smooth, fast, and absolutely final. The Colt appeared in his hand like magic, its barrel trained on the man's heart. Now here's what's going to happen, Jake said conversationally. You three are going to walk out that door, mount your horses, and ride until you can't smell this town anymore. And if I ever see you within 100 miles of this lady again, I'll plant you so deep the worms will need a map to find you. The standoff lasted an eternity that was probably only seconds. Finally, the scarred man raised his hands slowly. This ain't over, Morrison. Yes, Jake said quietly, it is. After they left, the saloon gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but Jake barely noticed. His attention was entirely focused on Ayanna, who was looking at him with something that might have been wonder. Why? She asked simply. Jake holstered his gun and stepped closer, close enough to smell the sage and wildflowers in her hair. Because some things are worth protecting. And some women. He paused, his calloused hand almost touching her cheek before he pulled back. Some women deserve better than what this world usually gives them. Ayanna's breath caught. In her culture, a man's protection was not given lightly, it was a promise, a bond that ran deeper than blood. The stable, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Meet me there when the moon reaches its peak. There are things I need to tell you away from watching eyes. Jake nodded, understanding passing between them like a shared secret. Whatever was about to happen would change everything, for both of them. The stable smelled of hay and leather, horses and honest sweat, scents that spoke of hard work and simple truths. Moonlight streamed through the gaps in the wooden walls, painting silver stripes across the straw-covered floor. Jake arrived first, his boots silent on the packed earth. He'd removed his hat, and his dark hair caught the pale light as he waited, every nerve alive with anticipation. The horses nickered softly in their stalls, sensing the electricity in the air. When Ayanna appeared in the doorway, she looked like something from a dream, or perhaps a beautiful nightmare. She'd let her hair down, and it flowed around her like a dark river. Her doeskin dress seemed to glow in the moonlight, and her eyes held depths that promised both salvation and damnation. You came, she said softly, stepping into the stable's shadowy embrace. Did you think I wouldn't? Jake's voice was rough with emotion he couldn't quite name. She moved closer, her bare feet silent on the straw. In my world, cowboy, promises are often broken like twigs in a storm. I'm not from your world, Jake replied, his eyes never leaving hers. And I don't break my promises. They stood facing each other in the silver-striped darkness, the air between them thick with unspoken desires and dangerous possibilities. Ayanna's hands trembled as she reached up to touch the scar on his face, her fingertips tracing the old wound with infinite gentleness. This mark, she whispered. It tells a story of pain. Jake's breath caught at her touch. We all carry scars, little wildflower. Some just show more than others. Her hand moved to rest against his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat beneath her palm. I have scars too, Iron Hand. Wounds that run deeper than flesh. Tell me, he said, his own hand covering hers. Ayanna's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Those men, they killed my family. Burned our village. I escaped, but I've been running ever since. Running and hiding and trying to stay pure in a world that wants to soil everything beautiful. Jake's jaw tightened with rage, but his touch remained gentle as he cupped her face in his calloused hands. You're safe now. I swear it on my mother's grave, no one will hurt you while I draw breath. The promise hung between them like a sacred vow. Ayanna leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as she savored the feeling of being protected, cherished. "I've never known a man's touch," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Never wanted to until I saw you walk into that saloon like you owned the world. Until you looked at me like I was something precious instead of something to be taken." Jake's control, already stretched thin, began to fray at the edges. "Ayana." She stepped closer, eliminating the last inches between them. Her body was warm against his, soft curves pressing against hard muscle. "Show me," she breathed against his lips. "Show me what it means to be touched by someone who sees my soul." The last of Jake's restraints snapped like an overstretched rope. His mouth found hers in a kiss that was both tender and desperate, a claiming that spoke of possession and protection in equal measure. Ayana melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she discovered the intoxicating power of desire. This was what the other women whispered about, this fire that burned in the blood, this need that made the world disappear until only two souls existed in the universe. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their bodies singing with newfound awareness. "The hay," Jake said roughly, his eyes dark with promise. "It's soft there, away from the world." Ayana nodded, trust and desire warring in her expression. "Yes," she whispered. "Away from everything but us." The hay rustled beneath them like whispered secrets as Jake spread his coat over the golden stalks, creating a nest away from the world's harsh realities. Moonbeams danced through the stable's weathered boards, painting their skin in silver and shadow. Ayana knelt on the makeshift bed, her hair cascading around her shoulders like a dark waterfall. Her eyes held Jake's with a mixture of trust and trembling anticipation that made his chest tight with emotion. "I've dreamed of this moment," she confessed, her voice soft as prairie wind. "Dreamed of hands that would worship instead of take, of a man who would see my spirit before my flesh." Jake knelt before her, his calloused fingers tracing the delicate line of her jaw. "You're trembling, little wildflower." "Like a Mustang feeling the saddle for the first time," she admitted with a shaky laugh. "Afraid but ready to run free." His lips found the pulse point at her throat, and she gasped at the sensation, like lightning touching earth. "We'll go slow," he murmured against her skin. "Like gentling a wild horse. No force, just patience and understanding." Ayana's hands explored the broad expanse of his chest as he slowly, reverently, began to unwrap her like a precious gift. Each touch was a question, each caress an answer to prayers she'd never dared voice. "Your skin," Jake breathed, his lips trailing fire along her collarbone, "tastes like honey and wildflowers." She arched beneath his ministrations, her body awakening to sensations she'd only imagined in her most secret dreams. When his mouth found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, she cried out softly, her fingers digging into his shoulders. "Easy, darling," he soothed, his voice rough with barely controlled desire. "Let me show you how beautiful surrender can be." The world outside ceased to exist. There were no vengeful men, no harsh frontier, no painful past. Only the two of them discovering the ancient dance that had been calling to them since their eyes first met. Ayana's innocence fell away like morning mist as Jake's patient hands taught her the language of desire. Every touch was a revelation, every kiss a promise of protection and passion intertwined. "Jake," she gasped as waves of sensation built within her like a gathering storm. "I feel like I'm flying and falling at the same time." "Let go," he whispered against her ear, his own control hanging by a thread. "Trust me to catch you." When the storm finally broke, Ayana cried out like a wild bird taking flight, her body arching as pleasure crashed over her in waves. Jake followed her over the edge, their souls joining in a moment of perfect unity that transcended the physical realm. Afterward, they lay entwined in the hay, their bodies slick with honest sweat, hearts beating in synchronized rhythm. Ayana traced lazy patterns on Jake's chest, marveling at the sense of completion she felt. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft with wonder and uncertainty. Jake's arms tightened around her protectively. "Now we build something new. A life where you never have to run again, where your purity isn't measured by what you've given, but by the love in your heart. And those men? They'll come back." Jake's eyes hardened with deadly promise. Let them come. They'll find out what happens when someone threatens what's mine. Ayanna lifted her head to look at him, seeing the fierce protector and tender lover combined in one magnificent man. Yours? If you'll have me, he said simply. A broken-down cowboy with more scars than sense, but a heart that beats only for you. Her answer was a kiss that tasted of forever and new beginnings. Outside, the desert wind sang through the stable walls, carrying their whispered promises into the star-filled night. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Jake and Ayanna knew their lives had changed irrevocably. They'd found something rare and precious in each other, a love that could weather any storm, a passion that would burn eternal as the desert stars. The frontier was still harsh, still dangerous, but they would face it together. The Apache princess who'd found her warrior, and the cowboy who'd discovered that sometimes the wildest hearts make the most faithful guardians. In the growing light, they began to plan their future, their voices soft with hope and their bodies still entwined like two souls who'd finally found their home.